can you walk that fine line between your company values, your personal values, and not getting under people's skin? Make sure you watch to the end of this interview as I talk to Adrienna, the CEO of Circular Economy Asia, as she navigates that line between her company's values, her personal values, and making sure that she retains the trust of her perfect prospects. Not only that, but we'll talk about the history of the circular economy in Asia, how it's growing and expanding, especially in Asia nowadays after the pandemic, and really get into some exciting times ahead, especially in terms of social media and also just the circular economy around the globe. So to not waste any more time, let's jump on in. And Adrienna, do you mind telling us a bit more about the Circular Economy Asia and what you do?
Okay, so Circular Economy Asia is obviously, of course, we're based in Asia, and we define the circular economy as many people seem to have their own definition or their own understanding of the circular economy. But for my organization, the circular economy is about three things. It's a closed loop system, which means we keep resources in play, but it's also about resource management and resource efficiency. So within that, of course, we have many concepts or functions, what I call functions, circular economy functions such as reuse and remanufacture, or the circular R's, what I call the circular R's. But those in itself, I don't believe are circular unless they're part of a system that at the end of the final use cycle, those materials can be reprocessed and put into a secondary raw materials industry. So lots of people are into reusing cups, for example, to get away from single-use plastic cups, and lots of cafes are now getting into the trend of having reusable cups, and that's a great initiative. But those reusable cups need to be made from a material that can be reprocessed, and at the end of the final use cycle, it needs to be part of a system where those cups end up being able to be reprocessed so they can be made into new cups. So that's really the essence of that's how I define the circular economy. And within that definition, we implement projects to facilitate those outcomes.
Right. So really focusing on making that transition to where something can be created and then reused again later, and really bringing back those materials back to the beginning so it can create that circular economy, right?
That's right. And there's a lot of steps in between that whole cycle. So like that jumper that you're wearing, let's say that's made of cotton or wool, 100% wool, then the step that it might be at the end of its, when you're finished wearing it, it might go to a place where it could be reused by somebody else, or it could go to a place where it is shredded and those yarns are retwined so that it can then be made into a new jumper. So there are different, depending on the product or the item that you're talking about, there could be several steps in between, but ultimately everything dies in the end. So you need to factor in a system, or you need to create a system where those items, when they reach the end of their final use cycle, can be reprocessed. And that really comes down to the materials. So this is the kind of stuff that we work on.
Definitely. Very cool. So what kind of companies are you working with currently? Are you working with like packaging companies, or are you working with just general companies in terms of trying to make them more sustainable?
Well, my approach is that no company by itself can become circular. So that's the first step. So often a company thinks that I can walk into their company and make them circular and then they'll live happily ever after. And that's not possible. And the reason why it's not possible, because companies are connected to other companies. It's just not always obvious about how that connection enables their own circularity. So that's really the determining factor. And then, of course, that in itself appears to add a little bit more complexity, when reality is that it should really simplify a company's ability to become circular. But at the moment, the kinds of companies that we're targeting are companies that are interested in the development of a secondary raw materials industry. I mean, the circular economy is a big thing. And because it's a big thing and it has lots of moving parts, you can't actually do everything. So we focus on three key areas. One is skills training. We work with companies in regards to skills training and developing their own internal capacity so that it really, in the end, so they don't end up continuously hiring me, but they build their own internal capacity. And that's really what you want. You want people within companies to develop those skills, mainly also because people move around. So people don't stay at the one company forever. So if you train staff well properly, then they can, when they move around, then they're taking those skills to other companies as well. And really that's a critical component of the work that we do. So there are three areas: one, skills training, the development of a secondary raw materials industry, and then circular and sustainable supply chains.
Gotcha. That's great. So really, with being able to go into these companies and train these individuals, you're really empowering those companies and empowering the individuals at each of these companies. And it really creates a whole network where it can just continue to grow outside of your individual ability, right? You're only one person, but if you can empower these companies and then all the individuals there, then it can really, continue to spread and grow even faster, which is really awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's how it should work, really.
Sure, definitely. And what are your goals for 2022 in terms of the education? Are you looking to expand in those areas? Do you have any specific plans for educating more and more companies? What are your goals?
Oh, okay. So it's pretty simple, really. We've been around for more than 5 years. We launched in 2016, but in those early years, I live in Asia, and so in those early years, nobody in Southeast Asia was interested in the circular economy or sustainability. They considered it a Western concept. They see it as a cost, and a cost that they don't want to spend, and governments see it as a threat to their sense of development, that they see it as environmentalism or activism, and that stop development and et cetera, et cetera. So there's really a lot of misunderstanding. So we didn't get a lot of work. And also at the same time, my organization, as I said, the circular economy is complex. So we actually, struggle to define what is it that we actually want to do. Do we want to be a think tank? Do we want to do education and awareness? What is it that we're going to do within this great concept? I worked in the food industry for many years, and I've lived in Asia for many years. So I didn't have to learn about that. I just had to figure out how I was going to build my organization. And the thing is that often with great ideas, you look at the market to help you determine or navigate how you're going to shape your company. But in this case, that option wasn't available because nobody was interested. So, and then COVID came along 2 years ago, and that was the end of that, really. So COVID's really changed the game all across Asia. It's not just because of COVID, but because the great reset that we've gone through and people have gone through. And sustainability has now become really big deal across Asia, or it's becoming a very big deal, and climate change, because we're feeling the impacts of climate change, as is many other countries across the world: fires, droughts, floods, on a whole new different level than what we've had before. So now that I've set that scene, of course, our goal, just finished a strategy meeting with my board of directors just a couple of weeks ago. And of course, the aim now is to increase our visibility. That's one of the key areas. People have heard about us, but they don't actually know what we do. So the aim, of course, is to change that, is to say that we deliver services, because we have to generate revenue and have to pay salaries and pay expenses. And so we do it. Even as an NGO, we still have to generate revenue, which means we're actually running a business, really, except our goals are not primarily based around profit. Our goals are about our mission and vision for the organisation. So the key factor is this year incorporated into some other strategic goals, but is to increase our visibility with the message behind that visibility, that we provide services to your organisation within the context of skills training, development of a secondary raw materials, and supply chain, circular. And so within those three pillars.
Gotcha, very cool. And that kind of leads very nicely into my next question, which is how do you think that social media will be a part of that mission to really spread your word and get your awareness out there for your business?
Well, of course, as you would know, that different channels of social media have a different audience, and then you have to talk to those different audiences in a different way. So the way I talk to my audience on LinkedIn, I might have the same type of post, but I will frame it differently on LinkedIn than I do on Facebook, or I do on Instagram, or I do on Twitter. It's a different message. And those different messages, it's not just about the different messaging, but people on Facebook aren't perhaps a type of customer who will pay for our services. Not that we're expensive, but they just are not, perhaps a decision maker in their company to sign off on or agree to or be interested in skills training. So that would probably be our audience in LinkedIn. And then mainly many of those decision makers actually aren't really active on LinkedIn. Lots of the decision makers looks like they're posting, but they're not posting. They have a marketing team who are posting for them. So, or they've outsourced their social media to somebody else, and these people are not reporting back to, that, there's this great company on LinkedIn called Circular Economy Asia that you need to know about. So we get back to traditional methods of getting out there and shaking hands and doing a whole lot of other things outside of social media, such as being involved in conferences and other where you're on perhaps a panel with other people who are decision makers in a company. So if a company was interested in us, what they will do most likely is look at our social media posts. They will look at what are we saying on social media. So for example, we're going to relaunch our Asian Plastics and Packaging Agreement. So if the plastics industry were interested in us, they would be interested in what kind of posts are we making? Are we anti-plastic? What do we want to see straws banned or, whatever? And they will look at our social media posts to gauge and understand what kind of organization we are. And if they like our social media posts, then they will be open to a knock on the door from me. So social media isn't necessarily about the direct connection. It's about how people understand you and how that perception of you, which is still a very important component that you need to cultivate.
Right, for sure. So it's not as much as like you're expecting people to actually reach out to you on social media. It's more of when they're doing their due diligence, when they're coming back and looking to say like, oh, is this somebody that I would actually like to work with? Like, what are they posting? What are they looking at?
Right.
At that point.
Exactly right. And do we share the same values? So really social media is much more important from that angle rather than the angle of trying to pitch on social media. Like I see some people like they're directly pitching on LinkedIn. It's like they're throwing out this big wide net and hoping that on a percentages level that they will catch a few fish. And I don't look at LinkedIn like that. I looked at LinkedIn as a conversation that I'm having with an unknown audience, and I continue that conversation, but I'm not looking necessarily so much that I'm going to hook fish, but that people will see me as a credible, reliable organization. And then when they're ready to think about circular economy services, they will think that we're the right company to talk to.
Are you active on multiple areas of media or just active on LinkedIn and Facebook? Or where do you where are your...
We're not as active, right. So we're not as active on social media as I would like to be. And there's a few logistics reasons for that. But when I hire even a part-time communications person, I'm going to significantly expand our social media reach. But again, it's not necessarily to build awareness about the circular economy. It's to build our conversation base, that we're having a conversation like Reddit's a really interesting platform if we want to enter the US market or be interested in US companies. But again, it's really about having a conversation. That's how I see social media. So, and it depends on which countries and which are the most active and where we can. I don't see social media as a place to generate business. I see social media as a place where people can understand who we are as an organization. And that's the more channels we're on without being too much on social media. But traditional media is still really big here in Asia. So people still read newspapers and magazines. So it's not all online. And so writing articles in newspapers for newspapers is important, and still being involved in traditional media is still quite important. And one of the things I'll be exploring later on in the year is more of an omni-channel approach to the way that we talk about topics. So what that means, we're going to relaunch a magazine that I've had running for the last couple of years, but I'm going to relaunch it in April. And so each month, the magazine will tackle a particular topic. So that topic will be discussed in our podcast. It'll be discussed on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then on YouTube. So depending on what platform you like, you will be able to understand that topic and engage with us on that topic much as you would like. I'm going to take on a more of an omni-channel approach to the way that we talk about topics.
Right, definitely. So being able to be present on multiple channels of social media. And do you use a lot of repurposed content? So you kind of take what you post onto LinkedIn and then just kind of tweak it to post onto Facebook or YouTube or any other site?
Yeah, a little bit of that, not too much. Not as much as I would like, but in April, once I start moving along with relaunching the magazine, there'll be a little bit more of that. As I said, we focus on different topics, but you can't focus on on the same topic for a whole month. I've noticed that on Facebook, I often run themes for up to 3 days, and I find that by the third day, while I'm talking on the same theme, my numbers go down. So the first day is okay, the second day is okay, and the third day is like people are saying, oh no, what, this again? Even though it's a different aspect of the same theme, they're just not interested. By the third day, they just want something new now. So it can get very tiring, really. But anyway, so a little bit more of that, of using the same content.
Right, for sure. But maybe taking it in a way that's maybe recycle, make it out for 3 months, get a plan out for like, okay, we're going to talk about these type of topics, and then refresh every like 3 or 4 months or something like that to make it a little bit easier. Because social media can be difficult, especially when you're trying to be on all the channels all at once. So
right, that's right. And you need to be very careful with the way you construct your messages. If you're too bland, you're nothing, you're bland, you can't afford to be controversial because people look at what you're saying. So there's a very narrow range of how you talk to your audience without being too boring or without being too controversial, especially within the circular economy and sustainability. We're talking about very sensitive topics. Climate change is an incredibly sensitive topic. And I know that some government agencies read my stuff because they're interested in what I'm talking about on that particular topic. So I can't afford to be controversial. I need to be informative. And so you're dealing with very sensitive topics for a lot of people. And you need to be able to navigate that sensitivity in a way that you keep as many stakeholders engaged as possible. I mean, not everybody's going to agree with you, and they tell me they don't agree with me, and that's fine. But they're not hating me. I mean, they're not pissed off at me. They just say, we don't agree, and that's okay. And I tell them I don't agree with what they're saying, but we still have we still are connected, and we move on to other discussions on social media. But it can sometimes be not easy to. It's not an easy path to tread sometimes.
Right, because you have to tread that line very carefully of not trying to completely alienate some people, but also putting forth, what you believe and what you stand for. So it's definitely a fine line that you have to tread very carefully. And for yourself, do you find that you wish that you could be more open out on social media and be more of like a hard stance on what you believe in, or is it kind of like, well, you do what you can, and it is what it is?
Yeah, Billy, that's a great question because, yeah, there are some times where I feel like just saying how it is or my version of how it is. And sometimes I write it because I want to write it, but I very, very rarely publish it. I just write it because I'm angry or upset, and then but I know that I can't publish it. So I just get it out of my system and then rewrite it. You need to build trust because you need to build change. You can only get change if people trust you. And I can't risk that trust. So, for example, I was contacted by a US government agency to write up a proposal for them. And they sent me the brief, but their brief was wrong. So I had to rewrite their brief. I mean, not because that they're wrong people, but because we have, what they want to, I know what they want to achieve, but how they understand the circular economy was never going to get the outcome that they wanted. And that's just because they don't work in that area. And there's nothing else going on. They're not stupid people. They just don't have enough exposure to the circular economy, but they know what they want. And I could see what they want. They just hadn't structured it. But what I had to do is that I had to rewrite it for them and tell them they're wrong. But I have to tell them they're wrong in a very nice way to say, if you want to achieve what you want, you're going to have to look at your definition completely differently. And how about this definition? How about this way? And if you like this way, if you like what the rest of this document says, and if you think that it can achieve, then you'll engage me. So there's a lot of that going on, and you need to write up a proposal where you're having to tell people that they're wrong, but you have to build trust as well. So it's very, very tricky, very tricky.
Definitely, that sounds very tricky to be able to walk that line as well of understand where they're coming from, and the way that you can give them what they need is actually going to take this route rather than the route they thought they were going to do.
Right, but the only way you're going to get them to shift to your path is through trust. They have to trust that, one, you're the right organization, that you can deliver what they're going to pay. And we're very tiny. So that's a huge leap. Most companies, for them, it's a huge leap for them to trust us that we can deliver, considering how small we are. But we can't get big unless companies take that leap of faith. So we have to build trust in many different ways. And that isn't always through social media, but social media plays a part in how we build trust through the kind of information and the kind of topics and the way we discuss topics.
Definitely. And where do you think so far in your, working through this, where do you think you found has been the channel that has allowed you to generate the most trust?
It's a difficult question to answer because I want to build trust across all different sectors of society. So, for example, in building a secondary raw materials industry, you need to build trust with decision makers who are looking at you through LinkedIn, but you also need to win the hearts and minds of average everyday people who are looking at you through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So you have to get them to dispose of their recyclable resources correctly. I don't call it waste, because it's not waste, it's just a recyclable resource. So you need these people to dispose of their recyclable resources correctly. So they're everyday people, just like you and me. I mean, I'm an everyday person, so I want to be talked to in a way that encourages me to that correct disposal habits. But then you also want to talk. So there's no one channel that does that, because you need everybody on board, and you need to build trust with everybody. Otherwise, if you have one component of the system that breaks down, it can screw up the whole system. So you can't afford that. So you need to be able to build trust across all different channels with all different types of people.
Yeah, for sure. As being part of that circular economy, you really have a unique challenge, because you not only are you trying to talk to the businesses, but you also have to educate the people who are buying from the businesses, because they're going to influence the business decisions, right? You know, those people that are consuming products or consuming these things are leading to the businesses making decisions on whether they want to try something that's in the circular economy and really try to use that based off of who's going to buy from them. If the end consumer isn't going to change their behavior, then the businesses aren't going to have a real economic justification for making that kind of decision.
Right. I'll give you an example on how this works on a bigger picture. Just recently, I disagreed with somebody on LinkedIn quite strongly against her post. She made a post about Unilever had embarked on an experiment in Indonesia for chemical recycling of single-use plastics, but these little single-use sachets. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with those, but across Asia, where people are very, very poor, they can't afford to go into a supermarket and buy a bottle of shampoo. So what they will do, they will go down to their local shop and they will buy a little tiny sachet of shampoo, or a little sachet of dishwashing liquid, or clothes detergent, because they can't afford to buy a big bag. They just don't have that, you know, they're very poor. But what they can do is that they can afford to buy a small sachet. And so what happens is that they buy these small sachets, they use the product, it's only enough for one. If it's a hair shampoo, it's only enough for one wash, and then they throw it away. And often that throwing it away is not throwing away in the rubbish, it's thrown away into the street, or anyway, ends up in our environment, whether it's land environment or in the oceans. And so environmental activists have been very, very vocal for companies to stop producing these sachets. And Unilever had embarked on a experiment to recycle these little sachets, to collect them and to recycle them. Now, these sachets often are made from multi different types of materials. So they're not a mono material, they will be multi different types of materials. So their ability to be able to be recycled can only be perhaps of a certain type, say could be chemical recycling. So Unilever embarked on an experiment in Indonesia for 2 years. I don't know, nobody knows what the story is behind it except for Unilever, but they decided to close down the factory that was doing this chemical recycling. And so some environmental activists on LinkedIn were targeting Unilever and saying Unilever's failed, they should stop producing these sachets, and they should be promoting refillable options. So I was quite upset with this kind of attitude. And so I responded quite strongly against this, that really we should be, I don't know what the failure is, but really we should be thanking Unilever for a €10 million experiment that, okay, failed, but what did we learn? They spent 10 million euros, which is a lot of money, on an experiment that many companies will not do. And I think we should celebrate that experiment, regardless if it failed, because there's learnings from those failures, and those learnings can be very important. But what it gave me the incentive to do was, when we launch our series of podcasts, is talk about this topic, but not in the traditional plastics way. I'm going to actually engage with retail shop designers. I'm going to talk about, often these little mom and pop stores in Asia, they're selling up to 500 different items in a very, very tiny wooden shop. And they don't have the space, the retail space, to put in fancy refillable stations. These single-use sachets are very conveniently placed on wooden cardboard backing, where you can hang up hundreds in a shop that you could never fill. So the point that I'm trying to make is that activists look at the problem without looking at the infrastructure of how is a shop designed that actually enables refillable stations to be conveniently placed in there without that store losing valuable real estate within their store that stops them selling other products. And they need to be selling up to these 500 different items to actually make a living every day. And if we take up valuable real estate within that shop, because we're now demanding that they have a refill station that's only got maybe 10 products, it doesn't make sense. So by looking at it from different ways, and also people are so poor, are we working with poor people by removing their option to buy these single sachets and forcing them to go to a refillable station? So there's a lot of factors at play here. And I'm not saying that environmentalists are wrong. I'm not saying that they're wrong. But the point is that it's a great social media topic, and it can be handled in a way that I think could be quite interesting on social media and generate a lot of interest by expanding the scope of how we look at things. And it's one of the very rare occasions where I said to this person, "You're wrong." I very, very, very rarely do that. And she backed down. I wasn't asking her to back down. I was trying to tell her that we shouldn't be attacking all the time. The point is that there's a lot of complexity in our world, how we deal with that complexity, but it also can open up other avenues, for example, like my organization, to be able to tackle that complexity in different ways, which adds to our brand. So people will go, "Wow, I never thought about the retail design of a shop. I'm just focused on plastic and how I hate plastic and how we should become sustainable. And I've never thought about how a shop is designed that can actually accommodate this." So by changing the conversation adds to our brand value. And even though we're an NGO, I need to think about these things. I need to think about our brand and our brand's value and how we position ourselves that tackles these big, complex, controversial topics, and that gets people thinking how we look at a problem. So there's lots of things that you can do, but ultimately you need to manage the brand of your company, or in my case, an NGO, that enables the NGO to continue to exist and generate revenue so we can fill our mission and vision of what we want to do.
Definitely. You're talking about how there's going to be different situations for the different things that are going on. And we can't just say like all plastic is bad and we need to fix this problem or this problem, but it really needs to be considered in each use case, right? Really saying this is an issue here and how do we fix that issue in this area and how do we fix this issue in this area? We can't just make blanket statements and say a silver bullet is going to either fix all or getting rid of something is going to be so much better, but it really needs to be certain cases. This might be the best solution or this might be the best solution. It's not just one size fits all.
This conversation with you is about social media, so it's about how we talk about that on social media, adds or subtracts from your brand's value. And if you're adding to your brand's value, then people are going to listen to you and hopefully take on some of the things that you're saying as thinking about, I like that. I think I might look at the world in that way, or that helps me understand the world in a different way. So, for example, looking at how a shop is designed, or these little tiny mum and pop stores, and there are zillions of them across Asia and in most developing countries. So by looking at how these little mum and pop stores are designed, helps us understand how we're actually going to tackle the problem. But what I'm trying to say is that the brand value is about trust. And if you have that trust, then people will engage and they might take what you're saying on board, which means that we get to deliver our vision and mission. We're about resource management. We're about closed loop systems. And if we do our job well, and if our brand value is strong, then we actually get to deliver impact, which is our vision and mission, to deliver that. And it's my job to deliver that, not just to my board of directors and staff, but also to the people that we work with and who believe in us. So you need to be able to build that brand value where companies will go, we want to work with you because your brand value is strong, and it adds to their brand value more than equally as much.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. That brand value is super important for any company, any brand, is really being able to say like what you value, what you believe in. And people are going to relate to that and understand that and want to work with you because of it.
Yeah, right.
It's super important. Yeah, definitely. Great. So we'll wrap up here with our last question. If there is one way that somebody can reach out to you to get in touch with you if they want to learn more or understand how they can help in any way, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Oh, just through our website. Just visit us on circulareconomyasia.org, and you can, find our contact form and just send us a note. Just say, hi, I like your company or I like your organization. How do I work with you?
Too easy. Just go to the website. Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much